Good evening. My name is Patrick Fay, and this is my commemorative speech. During times of great uncertainty, we find hope in those that exemplify humanity in the face of crisis. As entire nations are being placed on lockdown, as millions are being forced into unemployment, and with a global death toll that is reaching tens of thousands, one small Caribbean nation is providing that source of consolation amidst an unprecedented pandemic. With an extensive history of international humanitarian aid, the nation of Cuba is now emerging as the front runner in the fight against COVID-19. In typical fashion, the brave men and women of the Cuban medical personnel are once again heeding the call to assist amidst an international crisis. Leonardo Fernandez, who is a Cuban doctor, is 68 years old, and he's currently on his 8th international tour of medical duty. He says, "He who says he is not afraid is a superhero, but we are not superheroes. We are revolutionary doctors. We are all afraid, but we have a revolutionary duty to fulfill, so we take out fear and put it to one side." Despite being encumbered by economic embargoes, which exclude Cuba from a large portion of the world's trade markets, Cuba has made astonishing developments in the medical field. By placing public health as a primary goal, they produce more doctors than anywhere in the world. The World Health Organization states that Cuba is world famous for its ability to train outstanding doctors and nurses. In addition to producing an abundance of medical personnel, Cuba has also made very impressive strides in the fields of biotechnology and genetic engineering. As early as 1981, Cuba has been experimenting with the interferon antiviral treatment. In 1981, when Cuba was struck with a dengue fever outbreak, 300,000 Cuban citizens were provided with the interferon antiviral, and the mortality rates ceased and the outbreak of the disease on the island was halted. Medical scientists Caballero Torres and Lopez Matilla described this as the most extensive prevention and therapy event with interferon ever carried out in the world. Cuba currently utilizes interferon to treat things such as hepatitis, HIV, and shingles, and the interferon antiviral is currently being used worldwide to treat symptoms of coronavirus to great effect. Dengue virus outbreak would not be the only time the Cuban population was faced with severe disease. In 1984, meningitis was the leading cause of death on the island of Cuba. Once again, the biomedical sector of Cuba provided relief to the population by developing the world's very first meningitis B vaccine. This would go on to boast a 95% efficacy rate and would be awarded the gold medal for global innovation by the United Nations. Cuba would launch a mass vaccination campaign, and it would effectively halt the spread of meningitis on the island, save millions of lives. Since the inception of the post-revolution government in 1959, Cuba has provided direct aid to numerous countries during natural disasters and disease outbreaks. This is by no means a comprehensive list of all of Cuba's international humanitarian endeavors, but merely several that I've chosen to illustrate my point. Less than 1 year after the new government was formed, Chile was rocked with a massive earthquake which killed 5,000 people and left millions homeless. Cuba's quick and decisive assistance in this matter is described best by the then president of Chile, Salvador Allende, who stated, "Vast cities in my country had been devastated by the quake, and I watched as Cuba mobilized. And beyond the fraternal attitude of the government, the obligation of its leaders, I witnessed your attitude, the attitude of the people of Cuba." The meltdown of Chernobyl is considered the worst nuclear disaster in human history. Following the disaster, Cuba repurposed a resort that was once meant for wealthy tourists to a hospital city which would take in over 17,000 Ukrainian children who had been affected by the meltdown. According to Ukrainian record, Cuba performed millions of dollars worth of medical procedures and surgeries at no cost to the patients receiving the treatments. One of the worst natural disasters to ever strike South Asia is the Kashmir earthquake. It left 3.5 million people homeless, roughly 100,000 dead, and wiped up almost all of the infrastructure in this region of Pakistan. Destroying hospitals and schools, 19,000 of the victims were children as they attended school. Cuba launched an extensive relief campaign, sending over 2,000 doctors and nurses and millions of tons of medicines and medical equipment. In addition to sending doctors and medical equipment, they also built several field hospitals which were later to be donated to the Pakistani government. In addition to building the hospitals, they also scholarshiped 1,000 young rural Pakistani citizens into a medical training. When the deadly Ebola virus struck Western Africa, over 10,000 people lost their lives as the virus imposed a 40% mortality rate, which is 10 times greater than that of COVID-19. Cuba wasted no time in rallying hundreds of doctors and nurses and sending them to the Sierra Leone and Liberia areas. Cuba was the only nation other than the United States to provide direct human resources to the struggling African nations. This scenario was a prime example of Cuba recognizing a potential pandemic and making a quick and concerted effort to do their part in containing the outbreak so it does not spread to other countries. This selfless spirit of the Cuban doctors is embodied in the story of Felix Baez, who, while providing aid in Sierra Leone, contracted Ebola himself. And upon recovering from this disease, he went back to Africa to continue assisting in the Ebola outbreak. When asked about the situation, Felix said, "It's been like coming back from a war, alive. My compañeros shouted, smiled, and cried and hugged me. It's good to come back. I needed to come back. Ebola is a challenge that I must fight to the finish here to keep it from spreading to the rest of the world." Cuba offers a uniquely useful service to the current coronavirus outbreak. Cuban doctors have a unique experience in terms of providing aid amidst that of a disaster or an outbreak. In addition to this, they also have decades of experience working with the interferon alpha-2b antiviral medicine. Cuba had wasted no time in mobilizing its army of white robes against the COVID-19 outbreak. As the virus spreads from country to country, so does the humanitarian effort of Cuban doctors. Cuban doctors are currently providing aid in the epicenters of the coronavirus outbreak, Italy and China, as well as being in Brazil, Jamaica, Belize, Bolivia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Grenada. China has recognized Cuban-derived interferon alpha-2b as one of the few successful medications in terms of treating the symptoms of coronavirus. The Cuban Ministry of Public Health has also stated that there are currently over 45 nations requesting supplies of the Cuban interferon alpha-2b. The creator of interferon alpha-2b, Luis Herrera, states that in reference to the coronavirus outbreak, the world has an opportunity to understand that health is not a commercial asset, but a basic right. Every day as we tune into the news and see more and more reports of the virus spreading, death tolls rising, and the future growing ever more uncertain, it is imperative that we cast aside what makes us different and focus on that which unites us. There is no better way to illustrate this notion than by the actions of Cuban doctors risking their own safety and own well-being to assist those who are most vulnerable. Cuban humanitarian effort knows no national borders, does not recognize skin color or religious affiliation. Whether it be hurricanes in South America, nuclear meltdowns in Eastern Europe, earthquakes in the Middle East, or disease outbreaks in Africa, Cuban doctors answered the call for help, and they continue to do so today amidst the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you.